Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and this is OppenheimerArrow. A combination of Voidfletcher and Vaal Burning Arrow that seems to create some pretty large explosions and can do some pretty big damage. Now, if I'm being perfectly honest, Voidfletcher ain't really doing shit these days. I wanted to use it in a build, and I wanted to combine it with the Vaal Burning Arrow, so I went ahead and did this build here, which is based on Voltaxic. So yes, Burning Arrow is like fire-based to begin with. Doesn't matter. Slap a bunch of lightning damage on it, convert it to chaos with Voltaxic. You got yourself just a big lightning chaos hit, and that's all there is to it. But I also wanted to use some extra proj stacking and Voidfletcher, since no one really uses it after it got somewhat nerfed. And for good reason. It's pretty, like, whatever. You can maybe tell sometimes throughout the video that it does some damage, like it'll do some residual after effect damage. It's not very much is the problem. All the overlaps are tough to come by unless you're really like point blank and using barrage support to dump all of your Voidfletcher shots at the same time. But even then, it's a very weak amount of damage compared to Vaal Burning Arrow. Let's say my Vaal Burning Arrow crits for like 5 million, like just as an average hit. Voidfletcher's like 100k, some shit like that. And that said, Voidfletcher can overlap in the right circumstances. It just doesn't happen that often. But Vaal Burning Arrow also overlaps, and it is a nuke. It is very powerful and a very fun button to press. So it charges up really quick. It gives you 3 charges. It doesn't have a long cooldown between being able to charge up. So it has just turned into a pretty fun nuke heavy build where for most bosses you just charge up a Vaal Burning Arrow or 2 and let her rip. So it's not too different from previous Voltaxic build I put together, which I think was like Lightning Arrow with some Storm Rain. It's just similar thing, slightly different passive tree, using some clusters, slightly different gear, and then at the end of the day just using Burning Arrow instead, purely for the ability to press Vaal Burning Arrow. And this is just somewhat of a low-level Sanctum. I only just tried my first Sanctum, so don't be too impressed with that damage, but it is decent damage at the moment. Got something like 5 mil per arrow on Vaal Burning Arrow, and then it depends on what the amount of overlap is gonna be. And then of course it's a Deadeye with a archer base, so you don't really build too thick or anything. Just got some capped spell suppress, some evasion, and then move fast, kill things quick. That is typically the playstyle we go for with these types of things. And if you're going to build something like it, don't be surprised that you die to stuff occasionally, but the idea is that the other stuff dies before you get the chance to die yourself. So at this stage, I just took this character all the way through to level 90 really quick. It's just been zooming and booming and been quite a lot of fun, and already tried some Guardians and Uber, and it's gone well. So I'm pretty happy with the build so far. And I do want to take it a few more levels to min-max, because I only just figured out the last few pieces of gear, and I've only just started toying around with the totem setup. So this current totem setup is Explosive Arrow to add more Oppenheimerness to the build, but I'm not sure it's correct to be really doing in this setup. We'll see, because I could instead do some other types of skills, like just plain Barrage to help stack up with a better at the same time as still doing lots of damage. Since stacking arrows, Barrage is pretty damn good. So I'll try out some other things as well, but currently it's Explosive Arrow, and the totems are low level, so they're not doing much yet because they die occasionally. But in the end, a good totem setup in this build should also be 20 million DPS, which is pretty crazy. So there's nothing too crazy about the build at the moment, but it can pull out some pretty big DPS. And as you can see throughout this Uber Maven, I just decided to try at the end of the stream because I was feeling pretty powerful after just hitting level 90. With the right Vaal Burning Arrows, with the right DPS, it can be pretty big. There you go. Like, currently 3 Vaal Burning Arrows just unloading is like 60% of Maven's life, but I think it could still be higher. and we'll see how that goes in the coming day as I fine-tune and min-max a bit. You should also notice that since it's Voltaxic, we do have 90% shock on the enemy pretty comfortably because I'm using Thunder Fist as well. So this Uber Maven run was went really well until it didn't, because I died once or twice and then there was just stuff everywhere. Still managed to pull it out, but yeah, should be able to take on most Ubers, and hopefully we'll have a good endgame video next time. But for now, let me show you how I built the character thus far. So there's a character level 90 OppenheimerArrow Deadeye. Like I said, based around the Voltaxic bow. Love this bow, used it in a cast on crit build and a lightning arrow storm rain build if you want to check that one in a league or two ago. It's a really powerful bow, and the setup for that character was pretty damn powerful. More of a generic ranger style or Deadeye style setup, but this one can be pretty fun too with the extra explosions. So we're basing around this bow with lots of extra lightning converted to chaos, and then the shock effect that goes up to 90, and with the weapon you hit with your shock as though dealing 300% more damage, which means that the shocks are going to be a lot easier to come by. But I'm also using Thunder Fist to make that even more guaranteed. So as you can see throughout the Uber Maven, 90% was pretty easy to come by. And then with the Thunder Fist, this is currently my 5-link setup for Burning and Vaal Burning Arrow. We've got Burning Arrow, crit damage, early damage with attacks, and volatility. So we can use volatility because sorry, my voice is going just a little bit. Because we are using Dance with Death Keystone from the Brutal Restraint of Asenath, and that means Dance with Death cannot use a helmet, critical damage is lucky, and your damage with crits is lucky. Also means you can't use Helm, and then enemies get lucky crit against you. What lucky means, if you are unaware, is that it's just rolled twice, best result used, so it usually means that your crit's going to be somewhere from, if it's like 50, it's going to end up being something like 75, but for the most part I'm still trying to cap my crit as much as possible, and this character's got pretty much 100% crit rate. So you can't use a hat, but you can still wear a hat before speccing the Keystone just to have an MTX on, and you can even level gems in there if you want. I just put on a rat's nest so people wouldn't ask so much about a hat on the character, because they usually look at it and see a hat and they're like, oh, something about bad hat. Anyway, so there's no hat. Then we're also using Voidfletcher. The idea was to build around both Voidfletcher and Vaal Burning Arrow, but realistically this ain't doing too much. Like, it's an extra fun explosion, and then it's also got some damage on it, so it's not a wrong choice. I can keep using it by all means, but you can instead just go like a quiver with an extra arrow, some crit multi, some life, whatever it is you want. But it's pretty fun to put this thing on. At level 64 you can have this and this. I don't know about Thunder Fist, I think they're actually a bit higher. Let me double check. 67. So by 64, once you put your Voltaxic on, you should basically cruise control your way through the game. Once you get some Thunder Fists and then have a 5-link setup, it should become extremely easy to then tackle pretty much everything up until the end game. And for mapping, I was using Mirage Archer pretty much always. It's only just as I started going into end game, I took Mirage Archer out, because Mirage Archer won't benefit Vaal Burning Arrow at all. But for mapping, it's pretty good to have. So with this current setup, instead of early damage with attacks, I had Mirage Archer there. But yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can even 6-link it instead if you want. It's just that the level 30 added lightning is pretty powerful, and given that I've foregone the use of Wrath, extra added lightning is pretty powerful here. If you're also like scaling Wrath and getting more lightning from other sources, then the Thunder Fist added lightning isn't as powerful, and the 5-link isn't going to be as good as a 6-link. You can see this sort of setup in my previous Voltaxic setup, where I did focus a lot more on Wrath. That's where Thunder Fist would not be as good. But with this, I am still trying to scale lightning as much as I can in other sources, so lightning there, lightning there, lightning there, and some on an Abyssal Jewel. Even so, added lightning is still worth the extra 5-6 link. But yeah, I just didn't want to have to deal with going for extra int this time around and scaling Wrath and taking the points to make it worthwhile. So instead I've just done Grace and some Precision and left a lot of mana for extra comfort. So that's what the tree looks like. Instead of taking any aura nodes at the moment, I've just gone for a cluster and kept things pretty local. You do get additional proj there, you get additional proj there, and then 2 additional from Deadeye. And by level 55, you can already start shooting 4 projectiles and get rid of any LMP or GMP and have a pretty comfortable build. I'm also taking this mastery for cannot block attacks. I just spec'd out of it for the boss fight though. Other than that, we do have a Balance of Terror for applying Wither with your Despair. So the totem setup should help apply a lot of that. I then picked up a large cluster just for Overshock and Sadist, so nothing too special there. Overshock, Sadist, and 2 jewels that have some crit multi and damage. This one I made with just an extra Exalt Slam and stuff. And also using the Brutal Restraint for the Dance with Death, but I also looked up various things to go inside of it, and we've basically just got some damage, life, Roger damage, life, attack speed, cold res, crit chance, damage. So yeah, some pretty good things. And some evasion's going to go there as well. And then I'm also using tattoos to try and cap out 100% chance on avoid being stunned and 100% chance to not be chilled and frozen. There it is. So we can use a lot of our dexterity for tattoos. And in this case, I am just going to basically try and get stun immune and also freeze and chill immune. But you can do some other shit too if you really want, because dexterity isn't very needed in this build. Once you've solved accuracy, once you've solved resists and stuff. But yeah, I've also tried to spec a bit more into flasks. So these flask nodes here, these flask nodes here, and that does mean that my flasks are pretty long, but also regen really quickly on killing things. First time I've done something like that on these types of characters in that area, and it's pretty comfortable for sustaining flasks. It's also largely because I was just rolling a belt, so I grabbed some essences, a hunter belt, and was just rolling and rolled some decent stuff for flask stuff, so decided to lean a bit heavier into the flask situation, and that's where we're at. So then I've also capped suppress by getting some suppress boots and rolling, speccing a bunch of suppress on the tree, and then also rolling a chest. So I got a hunter chest and I used caster reroll over and over again on the harvest bench for additional curse until I got some good evasion, and then tried to finish suffixes with like annulling, slamming, that sort of thing, and got suppress. If you can't get suppress on your chest, then you could easily just spec an extra couple of points. Likewise, if you really can't be fucked, like there's lots of choices for chests in this build if you'd really want to. Instead of doing additional curse on the chest, you can just anoint it, because Heart of Darkness isn't, you know, game changing or anything. It's just a nice anoint. You can instead get additional curse there if you'd rather. So this amulet was like a divine. You're looking for crit multi, early damage, maybe some lightning as well. I then picked up both of these fractures for like 50C each, and then just rolled with lightning damage essences until some good stuff happened. So these weren't very expensive. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. And then, like I said, you can do something different instead of Voidfletcher if you really want. It's kind of useless, but does feel kind of fun. We then have in the setup here for Mana Forged Arrows. So Mana Forged Arrows, Frenzy, and Ensnaring Arrow. Since I don't have any actual pierce anywhere, Ensnaring Arrow is always gonna like land on things. So then got Power Charge on crit, and it's life tap, so every time I attack, we'll proc these arrows and stuff. It's more of a utility setup. And then in the setup here, I'm just starting to play around with the totem setup, and I've got Barrage, Explosive Arrow, Hypothermia, Totem, Early Focus, and Volatility. Probably get rid of the Early Focus just so it can actually shock on its own as well sometimes, but most of the shock should be coming from me. And yeah, down here we got Frostblink, Assassin Mark, Despair, and Precision. So I'm using Assassin Mark instead of Sniper's Mark because Sniper's Mark with Vaal Burning Arrow is a bit weird and not very good. If you have Sniper's Mark on the enemy and then you actually like target the enemy with your Vaal Burning Arrow, it will just send the burning arrows everywhere. If you target it at their feet, it will explode at the enemy and have that extra damage multiplier, but it's awkward. You know, if you miss, then it's just fucked up. And on top of that, we have a lot of extra damage against the enemy with Wither and Big Shocks already, so increased damage from Sniper's Mark isn't as good as it normally would be, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's basically the build thus far. Pretty fun, pretty, not too hard to put together. It's just hard to fine-tune gear if you really want to min-max for resists and everything. And yeah, pretty simple stuff for another Voltaxic build, but ultimately pretty damn fun to press the Vaal Burning Arrow button. Can recommend. You could just put it in any of your other setups if you really want, and turn yourself into a bit of an Oppenheimer Arrow as well. Current MTX setup is mostly just Pandemonium, Ember Keep, and then we've got the Divergence. And everyone asks about the skeletons. They are Dancing Skeleton Pet from Halloween, like MTX, which will probably come back around for Halloween. That's when they usually sell them. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully we got some good endgame next time. See you guys next time.